Welcome to SPF Talk, the show that brings you the scoop on the SPF and Polyurea industries. I'm Jay Davidson, CEO of Spray Foam Insider. Our topic today is SPF Lawsuit Avoidance. My guest is Dr. George Thompson, President and CEO of Chemical Compliance Systems. Dr. Thomas has a PhD in toxicology and pharmacology. He has 49 years of experience in industrial hazard and risk assessment, environmental evaluations, and product development. He has published 21 hazardous chemical books, 39 technical research articles, hosted 2 worldwide and 3 national safety health conferences, and has trained over 10,000 employees. He has been an expert witness in 27 legal cases, 4 of which have involved SPF. Welcome, Dr. Thompson. It's great to have you back as a guest.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Today we're going to discuss one particular case in which you were an expert witness. We'll use this to illustrate how understanding the chemistry of SPF can reduce or eliminate legal issues for SPF installers, distributors, and SPF manufacturers. I'd like to begin by asking you how you got involved in being an expert witness in this SPF case.
I was actually, this started back about 4 years ago when I was asked to give a presentation at the SPFA annual meeting in Albuquerque, New Mexico, on the use of science rather than pseudoscience in evaluating chemical and product risks. It was not specifically about SPF. Mm-hmm. One member of that audience remembered my presentation and contacted me subsequently when he became involved in a lawsuit, and he asked me to be his expert witness in that lawsuit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I understand that it was a husband and wife who filed the lawsuit 3 years after SPF had been installed. Can you set the stage for us and tell us why this husband and wife filed the lawsuit?
They had a very old home that was built in the 1880s, and they'd installed the SPF in their attic, in the walls of a second-floor bedroom, and in the dirt-floored basement to reduce their heating bills. The husband had previously been diagnosed with asthma, although he later attempted unsuccessfully to deny this. The SPF was installed improperly in one small area on the second floor, which was quickly replaced. Mm-hmm. The husband researched SPF on the internet and decided from that misinformation that the SPF had exacerbated his asthma.
You mentioned that the husband and wife were asked to leave the home during the SPF application, but they didn't want to comply with that. In fact, they didn't comply, and there were no records that they had been asked to leave during the application process.
Yeah, the homeowner claimed that they were never asked to leave the home during the installation, but the salesman, the installer, and the installation assistant all testified that they had given him that instruction. They further testified that he would walk into the spray area, so they would have to stop their installation and usher him out because he wasn't wearing personal protective equipment, and he had the potential for being exposed during the spray. The homeowner actually claimed at one point that the installer let him use the spray gun even though he was not wearing any personal protective equipment. Needless to say, both the installer and his assistant disputed this claim. Unfortunately, neither the salesman nor the installer asked the homeowner to sign an awareness document that listed the installation rules and requirements, so there was no first-hand evidence that he had been properly instructed.
This seems to be a common problem. I've read on the social media sites where contractors are complaining and kind of venting their frustration that homeowners just are refusing to leave during SPF applications. What should applicators do when homeowners refuse to leave, and what could they do up front to avoid these kinds of situations?
First, the salesman should have explained the SPF installation safety rules and requirements and had the homeowner sign a document that itemized the chemical and product safety stipulations. The installer should have repeated these same rules verbally and also posted no entrance signs when they started the installation.
Mm-hmm.
If the homeowner refuses to leave, then the installer should stop the installation until the homeowner complies.
Mm-hmm.
If the homeowner returns during the installation, again, the installation process should cease until the homeowner vacates the premises.
Mm-hmm.
The revenues realized from a single installation are far less than the cost of an SPF lawsuit.
During our prior conversation, you mentioned that the homeowners demanded that the SPF installer actually remove all of the SPF in the home, which they did in an attempt to satisfy the customers. But that was to no avail. Can you tell us why this was not seen as satisfactory by these customers, how expensive it was to remove the SPF, and who paid for it?
The homeowner believed the misinformation he'd read on the internet that talked about how dangerous SPF is. As a consequence, he demanded that the installer remove all of the SPF from all three areas, even though there's been a problem in only one small portion of one of the areas. And this effort to remove it physically cost the installer an estimated $100,000 in removal labor. It was very expensive, and they had teams of people working in there for many days. The homeowner then decided that the extremely minimal SPF residue that was left just in the cracks between the wood planks in this old home was still causing him upper respiratory irritation. So he sued the installer, the distributor, and the three involved manufacturers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you bring up an important point. Reading articles about SPF at random on the internet can cause a lot of confusion and lead people to believe information that just isn't so. So educating customers up front about SPF could play a major role in preventing the lawsuit. Would you agree with this?
Yes, I would. The internet contains a great deal of misinformation about SPF. Customers need to appreciate the difference between reputable and misleading information. Contractors or the installer should include references as to where they derive their information that they are presenting to the customer. And much of that will come from the manufacturer, but there's also information that can be available from the industry trade associations, which makes it much more generic.
Mm-hmm.
This way, the customer is directed to the proper resources for getting themselves informed.
Mm-hmm. So if this company or a company representative would have educated these customers up front, had them sign a document that they understand the proper safety procedures, and posted the no entry signs, this lawsuit may never have gone to court.
That's correct. If the installer salesman had properly prepared the customer with a full disclosure about the proper SPF installation process, explained how the chemistry makes it a safe product, and why adherence to the installation safety rules by both the installer and the homeowner were critical, then this installation may have never resulted in a lawsuit.
I understand that you were called in as an expert witness to testify that SPF was not responsible for the symptoms the husband and wife were experiencing. How much did the attorneys, judge, doctors, and expert witnesses for the plaintiffs understand about SPF?
Well, in the accompanying SPF chemistry chart, the plaintiff attorney and none of their three expert witnesses, including their medical expert from Duke Medical Center, nor the judge, understood anything about SPF chemistry, the installation process, and the industry safety guidelines. That's why I use this chart whenever I'm an expert witness for lawsuits, so that it is defined up front, because oftentimes and routinely, the plaintiff and his attorneys will talk about SPF. They'll use the SPF term, but as you can see on this chart, it's curing or cured SPF. When the plaintiff is actually talking about side A, the isocyanates.
Mm-hmm.
So it's critical in the lawsuit that the chemistry is understood and the definitions are clear.
Mm-hmm.
But since we were able to document to the judge that the plaintiff's attorneys did not understand these basic elements of the case. The judge disallowed all three of the plaintiff's experts, which resulted in a summary judgment against the plaintiff, which means the case was thrown out.
Mm-hmm. There was a physician who was designated as a medical expert for the plaintiffs because he had written a paper on SPF. Why was his testimony dismissed?
The physician published a paper that included information for 7 SPF installations that allegedly resulted in similar symptoms, and at least one of those involved homeowners. He also did some indoor air sampling, but none of the detected chemicals in his analyses were constituents in SPF. Mm-hmm. The physician actually acknowledged in his paper that he could not identify any SPF constituent chemical that could have caused the symptoms in his patients. We were also able to demonstrate that he had no understanding of the SPF installation process and chemistry, so the judge ruled that he was not allowed to testify as an expert witness.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that somebody who was believed to be an expert turned out not to be so. It seems that even though with the best intentions people may have, there's still some grave misunderstandings about SPF.
Yes, that's true. It's important for installation contractors to realize that their customers view them as responsible SPF experts. Therefore, the most successful installation companies not only accept this responsibility, but consciously train every level of their staff to understand the science behind the product and the installation process, so they can credibly be experts to their customers that can be relied upon.
And an interesting aspect of this case was when you and the attorneys inspected the home. You observed that there were no chemical products of any kind in the home, such as soaps, bleach, cleaning products, or paints. What was going on there, and how did that affect the case?
I had asked to perform a home inspection, specifically to observe potential exposure pathways from the areas of SPF installation to the living areas in this old home, and to see if there were other chemicals in the home that could potentially account for the plaintiff's alleged symptoms. When we noticed that the homeowner had removed all of his chemical products from the home prior to our inspection, a teleconference was quickly arranged that same day between all of the attorneys and the judge. Mm-hmm. The homeowners were ruled in that teleconference to have illegally tampered with seen and removed exculpatory evidence that would have supported the defense. Needless to say, this greatly compromised the plaintiff's case and could have resulted in a contempt of court ruling against the plaintiff, although that did not happen.
You mentioned that air sampling was done. What did the air sampling show?
Well, it's interesting after an SPF installation because in all the cases I've been involved in, the air sampling occurs long times after the installation. In this case, there were 3 different sets of air samples that were taken for the plaintiff, but all sampling occurred months to years after the SPF had been installed. None of these samples contributed to the plaintiff's case, but all of them documented that SPF constituents were not detected in any of the 3 air samples. Cured SPF samples, in other words, the solid material, were also taken by the homeowner from the removed materials a year after the installation. This solid SPF was then submitted to unrealistic elevated heating tests where the material was heated to 140 degrees Fahrenheit to see what could be driven off from the samples and detected. The only detected SPF constituent chemical was the fire retardant, which remains present in the cured SPF at very low levels, and that's intentional to prevent a potential fire. But the fire retardant has very minimal health effects.
Mm-hmm. Some contractors, they might feel uncomfortable educating customers up front because they may be concerned that when they start talking about it, it could maybe cause some undue alarm to the customers because they may have difficulty explaining the application process in layman's terms. How should SPF applicators educate their customers, and how do you think that doing so impacts their sales?
Most contractors should feel uncomfortable about educating their customers about SPF currently because few understand how SPF chemistry makes it a safe product. CCS, my company, offers a 2-hour training course on this topic for installers, for sales staff, and for management that results in participant certification. In this course, we explain the chemistry in layman's terms so that they can pass that information on to their customers. We can also provide a customized short brochure with illustrations like this chemistry chart that we've shown here in this podcast. Mm-hmm. The sales staff can then use this brochure to explain the concepts to homeowners in a scientific basis, and then leave the brochure with the homeowner when they finish their conversation.
So to kind of recap here, contractors should start by educating themselves, their employees, including their management and sales staff, about SPF chemistry. This way, they can feel confident that they are educating their customers properly and giving them the correct information, both in verbal and written form. This eliminates confusion and customer concerns that could arise later. Thereby, the company protects themselves from potential lawsuits up front. Since I can see your point, because since sales staffs are often the first line of communication with customers, I can see how important it is that all members of a company be properly educated about SPF's chemistry. How should SPF contractors educate their customers, and how do you think, the best way for them to impart information to make sure they're protected?
As a toxicologist that studied SPF chemistry, the installation process, product proprietary formulations where we've actually seen what chemicals are in the manufacturer's formulations, constituent chemical hazards, and product risks, I truly believe that SPF chemistry makes it a safe product when properly installed. However, there are 2 weak points that I recognize in this concept. First, SPF must be properly installed following the manufacturer's specifications and industry guidelines. Second, potential health effect responses cannot be predicted for individuals with asthma, known chemical allergies or sensitivities, or individuals with compromised lung functions like COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. As I have previously recommended on several occasions, including our last podcast, installers will be money ahead to not install SPF in homes with such individuals and residents unless the homeowner is willing to sign the hold harmless agreement. Our company has compiled the largest hazardous chemical and product relational databases in the world, including ecological health and safety data for over 200 chemicals used in SPF A and B side formulations. And since we've seen those formulations, we know we have the correct chemicals. We have utilized this chemistry knowledge along with the industry guidelines and our lawsuit experiences to develop our SPF Chemical Hazard Awareness online or on-site certification course. This training material is designed to translate the complexities of SPF chemistry into easily understood layman's language. Company certifications are achieved when at least one individual in each of 3 levels of management have been trained. That can include project managers, sales, and executive management, as well as the installers. These courses conform to the OSHA requirement that employers train their employees in the hazards of the chemicals to which they may be exposed. That's a federal requirement. These courses also include perspectives on how to avoid a lawsuit through using safe SPF chemistry principles and practices at each level in the company. Mm-hmm. In our courses, individual certification is contingent upon demonstrated awareness of worker and customer SPF chemical hazards and protection strategies by any of the participants in the courses.
Mm-hmm. How can contractors get in touch with you should they have any further questions?
In this next accompanying chart, we list our contact information. My email address is George Thompson with no dot at Chemply, that's CHEMPLY.com. And my telephone number is 973-663-2148.
We've only covered lawsuit avoidance as it pertains to this particular case. I understand that you have a lot more information about lawsuit avoidance. What resources can you offer to companies in the SPF industry?
Well, in this last chart that we have outlined here, another course that we can offer in SPF lawsuit avoidance and mitigation. It's a workshop that would train at least management levels in how to avoid the lawsuit. It emphasizes within it the role that installers, sales staff, and management are needed to be trained and certified in, and the breadth of considerations that need to be covered here. We have A through H in this, including the basic science behind it, various emergency procedures, and best practices as recommended by the industry. Throughout the supply chain is an important consideration because the entire industry has to be properly exposed and trained and follow these procedures because the weakest link in the chain is where the lawsuits are going to occur, and then this adds more misinformation to the internet and makes each installer's work, each distributor and each manufacturer's work more complicated.
Well, Dr. Thompson, thank you so much for joining us today and for explaining how SPF contractors can avoid potential lawsuits by understanding SPF chemistry.
You're very welcome, and thanks for inviting me.
The website for CCS is www.chemply.com, and Dr. Thompson's email is georgethompson@chemply.com. Thanks for listening to SPF Talk. This is Jay Davidson, CEO of Spray Foam Insider, the show that cuts through the jargon, gets to the point, and saves you time and money. If you would like to be a guest on our show, email us at info@sprayfoaminsider.com.